Chapter 7. The Examination. No sooner had Villefort left the salon than he assumed the grave air of a man who holds the balance of life and death in his hands. Now, in spite of the nobility of his countenance, the command of which, like a finished actor, he had carefully studied before the glass, it was by no means easy for him to assume an air of judicial severity. Except the recollection of the line of politics his father had adopted, and which might interfere, unless he acted with the greatest prudence, with his own career, Gérard de Villefort was as happy as a man could be. Already rich, he held a high official situation, though only 27. He was about to marry a young and charming woman, whom he loved, not passionately, but reasonably, as became a deputy attorney of the king, and besides her personal attractions, which were very great, Mademoiselle de Saint-Méran's family possessed considerable political influence, which they would, of course, exert in his favour. The dowry of his wife amounted to 50,000 crowns, and he had, besides, the prospect of seeing her fortune increased to 500,000 at her father's death. These considerations naturally gave Villefort a feeling of such complete felicity that his mind was fairly dazzled in its contemplation. At the door he met the commissary of police, who was waiting for him. The sight of this officer recalled Villefort from the third heaven to earth. He composed his face, as we have before described, and said, "I have read the letter, sir, and you have acted rightly in arresting this man. Now inform me what you have discovered concerning him and the conspiracy." "We know nothing as yet of the conspiracy, monsieur. All the papers found have been sealed up and placed on your desk. The prisoner himself is named Edmond Dantès, mate on board the three-master, the Pharaon, trading in cotton with Alexandre and Smyrna, and belonging to Morel and Son of Marseille. Before he entered the merchant service, had he ever served in the marines?" "Oh no, monsieur. He is very young." "How old?" 19 or 20 at the most." At this moment, and as Villefort had arrived at the corner of the Rue du Conseil, a man who seemed to have been waiting for him approached. It was Monsieur Morel. "Ah, Monsieur de Villefort," cried he, "I am delighted to see you. Some of your people have committed the strangest mistake. They have just arrested Edmond Dantès, mate of my vessel." "I know it, monsieur," replied Villefort, "and I am now going to examine him." "Oh," said Morel, carried away by his friendship, "you do not know him, and I do. He is the most estimable, the most trustworthy creature in the world, and I will venture to say there is not a better seaman in all the merchant service. Oh, Monsieur de Villefort, I beseech your indulgence for him." Villefort, as we have seen, belonged to the aristocratic party at Marseille, Morel to the plebeian. The first was a royalist, the other suspected of Bonapartism. Villefort looked disdainfully at Morel and replied, "You are aware, monsieur, that a man may be estimable and trustworthy in private life, and the best seaman in the merchant service, and yet be, politically speaking, a great criminal. Is it not true?" The magistrate laid emphasis on these words, as if he wished to apply them to the owner himself, while his eyes seemed to plunge into the heart of one who, interceding for another, had himself need of indulgence. Morel reddened, for his own conscience was not quite clear on politics. Besides, what Dantès had told him of his interview with the Grand Marshal, and what the Emperor had said to him, embarrassed him. He replied, however, "I entreat you, Monsieur de Villefort, be as you always are, kind and equitable, and give him back to us soon." This "give us" sounded revolutionary in the deputy's ears. "Aha," murmured he, "is Dantès then a member of some Carbonari society, that his protector thus employs the collective form?" "He was, if I recollect, arrested in a tavern, in company with great many others." Then he added, "Monsieur, you may rest assured I shall perform my duty impartially, and that if he be innocent, you shall not have appealed to me in vain. Should he, however, be guilty in his present epoch, impunity would furnish a dangerous example, and I must do my duty. As he had now arrived at the door of his own house, which adjoined the Palais de Justice, he entered, after having coldly saluted the shipowner, who stood as if petrified on the spot where Villefort had left him. The antechamber was full of police agents and gendarmes, in the midst of whom, carefully watched, but calm and smiling, stood the prisoner. Villefort traversed the antechamber, cast a side glance at Dantès, and taking a packet which a gendarme offered him, disappeared, saying, "Bring in the prisoner." Rapid as had been Villefort's glance, it had served to give him an idea of the man he was about to interrogate. He had recognized intelligence in the high forehead, courage in the dark eye and bent brow, and frankness in the thick lips that showed a set of pearly teeth. Villefort's first impression was favourable, but he had been so often warned to mistrust first impulses that he applied the maxim to the impression, forgetting the difference between the two words. He stifled therefore the feelings of compassion that were rising, composed his features, and sat down, grim and sombre, at his desk. An instant after Dantès entered, he was pale but calm and collected, and saluting his judge with easy politeness, looked round for a seat, as if he had been in M. Morel's salon. It was then that he encountered for the first time Villefort's look. That look peculiar to the magistrate, who, while seeming to read the thoughts of others, betrays nothing of his own. "Who and what are you?" demanded Villefort, turning over a pile of papers containing information relative to the prisoner that a police agent had given to him on his entry, and that already in an hour's time had swelled to voluminous proportions, thanks to the corrupt espionage of which the accused is always made the victim. "My name is Edmond Dantès," replied the young man calmly. "I am mate of the Pharaon, belonging to Messrs. Morel and Son." "Your age?" continued Villefort. 19, returned Dantès. "What were you doing at the moment you were arrested?" "I was at the festival of my marriage, monsieur," said the young man, his voice slightly tremulous. So great was the contrast between that happy moment and the painful ceremony he was now undergoing. So great was the contrast between the sombre aspect of M. de Villefort and the radiant face of Mercédès. "You were at the festival of your marriage," said the deputy, shuddering in spite of himself. "Yes, monsieur. I am on the point of marrying a young girl I have been attached to for 3 years." Villefort, impassive as he was struck with this coincidence, and the tremulous voice of Dantès, surprised in the midst of his happiness, struck a sympathetic chord in his own bosom. He also was on the point of being married, and he was summoned from his own happiness to destroy that of another. "This philosophic reflection," thought he, "will make a great sensation at M. de Saint-Méran's." And he arranged mentally, while Dantès awaited further questions, the antithesis by which orators often create a reputation for eloquence. When this speech was arranged, Villefort turned to Dantès. "Go on, sir," said he. "What would you have me say?" "Give all the information in your power." "Tell me on which point you desire information, and I will tell you all I know. Only," he added with a smile, "I warn you, I know very little." "Have you served under the usurper?" "I was about to be mustered into the Royal Marines when he fell." "It is reported your political opinions are extreme," said Villefort, who had never heard anything of the kind, but was not sorry to make this inquiry, as if it were an accusation. "My political opinions?" replied Dantès. "Alas, sir, I never had any opinions. I am hardly 19. I know nothing. I have no part to play. If I obtain the situation I desire, I shall owe it to M. Morel. Thus all my opinions, I will not say it public, but private, are confined to these three sentiments. I love my father, I respect Monsieur Morel, and I adore Mercedes. This, sir, is all I can tell you, and you see how uninteresting it is." As Dante spoke, Villefort gazed at his ingenuous and open countenance, and recollected the words of René, who, without knowing who the culprit was, had besought his indulgence for him. With the deputy's knowledge of crime and criminals, every word the young man uttered convinced him more and more of his innocence. This lad, for he was scarcely a man, simple, natural, eloquent with that eloquence of the heart never found when sought for, full of affection for everybody because he was happy and because happiness renders even the wicked good, extended his affection even to his judge, spite of Villefort's severe look and stern accent. Dante seemed full of kindness. "Pardieu," said Villefort, "he is a noble fellow. I hope I shall gain René's favour easily by obeying the first command she ever imposed on me. I shall have at least a pressure of the hand in public, and a sweet kiss in private." Full of this idea, Villefort's face became so joyous that when he turned to Dante, the latter, who had watched the change on his physiognomy, was smiling also. "Sir," said Villefort, "have you any enemies, at least, that you know?" "I have enemies?" replied Dante. "My position is not sufficiently elevated for that. As for my disposition, that is, perhaps, somewhat too hasty. But I have striven to repress it. I have had 10 or 12 sailors under me, and if you question them, they will tell you that they love and respect me, not as a father, for I am too young, but as an elder brother." "But you may have excited jealousy. You are about to become captain at 19, an elevated post. You are about to marry a pretty girl who loves you, and these two pieces of good fortune may have excited the envy of someone." "You are right. You know men better than I do, and what you say may possibly be the case, I confess. But if such persons are among my acquaintances, I prefer not to know it, because then I should be forced to hate them." "You are wrong. You should always strive to see clearly around you. You seem a worthy young man. I will depart from the strict line of my duty to aid you in discovering the author of this accusation. Here is the paper. Do you know the writing?" As he spoke, Villefort drew the letter from his pocket and presented it to Dante. Dante read it. A cloud passed over his brow as he said, "No, monsieur, I do not know the writing, and yet it is tolerably plain. Whoever did it writes well. I am very fortunate," added he, looking gratefully at Villefort, "to be examined by such a man as you, for this envious person is a real enemy." And by the rapid glance that the young man's eyes shot forth, Villefort saw how much energy lay hid beneath his mildness. "Now," said the deputy, "answer me frankly, not as a prisoner to a judge, but as one man to another who takes an interest in him. What truth is there in the accusation contained in this anonymous letter?" And Villefort threw disdainfully on his desk the letter Dante had just given back to him. "None at all. I will tell you the real facts. I swear by my honor as a sailor, by my love for Mercedes, by the life of my father." "Speak, monsieur," said Villefort. Then internally, "If René could see me, I hope she would be satisfied, and would no longer call me a decapitator." "Well, when we quitted Naples, Captain Leclerc was attacked with a brain fever. As we had no doctor on board, and he was so anxious to arrive at Elba that he would not touch at any other port, his disorder rose to such a height that at the end of the 3rd day, feeling he was dying, he called me to him. "My dear Dante," said he, "swear to perform what I am going to tell you, for it is a matter of the deepest importance." "I swear, Captain," replied I. "Well, as after my death, The command devolves on you as mate. Assume the command and bear up for the island of Elba. Disembark at Porto Ferraio. Ask for the Grand Marshal. Give him this letter. Perhaps they will give you another letter and charge you with a commission. You will accomplish what I was to have done, and derive all the honor and profit from it. I will do it, Captain, but perhaps I shall not be admitted to the Grand Marshal's presence as easily as you expect. Here is a ring that will obtain audience of him and remove every difficulty, said the captain. At these words he gave me a ring. It was time. 2 hours after he was delirious, the next day, he died. And what did you do then? What I ought to have done, and what everyone would have done in my place. Everywhere the last requests of a dying man are sacred, but with a sailor the last requests of his superior are commands. I sailed for the island of Elba, where I arrived the next day. I ordered everybody to remain on board and went on shore alone. As I had expected, I found some difficulty in obtaining access to the Grand Marshal, but I sent the ring and I had received from the captain to him, and was instantly admitted. He questioned me concerning Captain Leclerc's death, and, as the latter had told me, gave me a letter to carry on to a person in Paris. I undertook it because it was what my captain had bade me do. I landed here, regulated the affairs of the vessel, and hastened to visit my affianced bride, whom I found more lovely than ever. Thanks to Monsieur Morel, all the forms were got over. In a word, I was told, as I told you at my marriage feast, and I should have been married in an hour, and tomorrow I intended to start for Paris, had I not been arrested on this charge, which you as well as I now see to be unjust. Ah, said Villefort, this seems to be the truth. If you have been culpable, it was imprudence, and this imprudence was in obedience to the orders of your captain. Give up this letter you have brought from Elba, and pass your word you will appear should be required, and go and rejoin your friends. I am free then, sir? Cried Dante joyfully. Yes, but first give me this letter. You have it already, for it was taken from me, with some others which I see in that packet. Stop a moment, said the deputy, as Dante took his hat and gloves. To whom is it addressed? To Monsieur Noirtier, Rue Coqueron, Paris. Had a thunderbolt fallen into the room, Villefort could not have been more stupefied. He sank into his seat and hastily, turning over the packet, drew forth the fatal letter, at which he glanced with an expression of terror. Monsieur Noirtier, Rue Coqueron, numéro 13, murmured he, growing still paler. Yes, said Dante. Do you know him? No, replied Villefort. A faithful servant of the king does not know conspirators. It is a conspiracy, then? Asked Dante, who, after believing himself free, now began to feel a tenfold alarm. I have, however, already told you, sir, I was entirely ignorant of the contents of the letter. Yes, but you know the name of the person to whom it was addressed, said Villefort. I was forced to read the address, to know to whom to give it. Have you shown this letter to anyone? Asked Villefort, becoming still more pale. To no one, on my honor. Everybody is ignorant that you are the bearer of a letter from the island of Elba and addressed to Monsieur Noirtier. Everybody except the person who gave it to me. And that was too much, far too much, murmured Villefort. Villefort's brow darkened more and more. His white lips and clenched teeth filled Dante with apprehension. After reading the letter, Villefort covered his face with his hands. Oh, said Dante timidly, what is the matter? Villefort made no answer, but raised his head at the expiration of a few seconds, and again perused the letter. "And you say that you are ignorant of the contents of this letter." "I give you my word of honor, sir," said Dante. "But what is the matter? You are ill. Shall I ring for assistance? Shall I call?" "No," said Villefort, rising hastily. "Stay where you are. It is for me to give orders here, and not you." "Monsieur," replied Dante proudly, "it was only to summon assistance for you." "I want none. It was a temporary indisposition. Attend to yourself. Answer me." Dante waited, expecting a question, but in vain. Villefort fell back on his chair, passed his hand over his brow, moist with perspiration, and for the third time read the letter. "Oh, if he knows the contents of this," murmured he, "and that Noirtier is the father of Villefort, I am lost." And he fixed his eyes upon Edmond, as if he would have penetrated his thoughts. "Oh, it is impossible to doubt it," cried he suddenly. "In heaven's name," cried the unhappy young man, "if you doubt me, question me. I will answer you." Villefort made a violent effort, and in a tone he strove to render firm. "Sir," said he, "I am no longer able, as I had hoped, to restore you immediately to liberty. Before doing so, I must consult the trial justice. What my own feeling is you already know." "Oh, monsieur," cried Dante, "you have been rather a friend than a judge." "Well, I must detain you some time longer, but I will strive to make it as short as possible. The principal charge against you is this letter, and you see—" Villefort approached the fire, cast it in, and waited until it was entirely consumed. "You see, I destroy it." "Oh," exclaimed Dante, "you are goodness itself." "Listen," continued Villefort. "You can now have confidence in me after what I have done." "Oh, command, and I will obey." "Listen. This is not a command, but advice I give you." "Speak, and I will follow your advice." "I shall detain you until this evening in the Palais de Justice. Should anyone else interrogate you, say to him what you have said to me, but do not breathe a word of this letter." "I promise." It was Villefort who seemed to entreat, and the prisoner who reassured him. "You see," continued he, glancing toward the grate, where fragments of burnt paper fluttered in the flames, "the letter is destroyed. You and I alone know of its existence. Should you therefore be questioned, deny all knowledge of it. Deny it boldly, and you are saved." "Be satisfied, I will deny it." "It was the only letter you had?" "It was." "Swear it." "I swear it." Villefort rang. A police agent entered. Villefort whispered some words in his ear, to which the officer replied by a motion of his head. "Follow him," said Villefort to Dante. Dante saluted Villefort and retired. Hardly had the door closed when Villefort threw himself, half fainting, into a chair. "Alas, alas," murmured he, "if the procureur himself had been at Marseille, I should have been ruined. This accursed letter would have destroyed all my hopes. Oh, my father, must you, past career, always interfere with my successes?" Suddenly a light passed over his face. A smile played round his set mouth, and his haggard eyes were fixed in thought. "This will do," said he, "and from this letter, which might have ruined me, I will make my fortune. Now, to the work I have in hand." And after having assured himself that the prisoner was gone, the deputy procureur hastened to the house of his betrothed. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Château d'If. The commissary of police, as he traversed the antechamber, made a sign to two gendarmes who placed themselves one on Dante's right and the other on his left. A door that communicated with the Palais de Justice was opened, and they went through a long range of gloomy corridors, whose appearance might have made even the boldest shudder. The Palais de Justice communicated with the prison, a sombre edifice that from its grated windows looks on the clock tower of the École. After numberless windings, Dante saw a door with an iron wicket. The commissary took up an iron mallet and knocked thrice. Every blow seemed to Dante as if struck on his heart. The door opened, the two gendarmes gently pushed him forward, and the door closed with a loud sound behind him. The air he inhaled was no longer pure, but thick and mephitic. He was in prison. He was conducted to a tolerably neat chamber, but grated and barred, and its appearance, therefore, did not greatly alarm him. Besides, the words of Villefort, who seemed to interest himself so much, resounded still in his ears like a promise of freedom. It was 4 o'clock when Dante was placed in this chamber. It was, as we have said, the 1st of March, and the prisoner was soon buried in darkness. The obscurity augmented the acuteness of his hearing. At the slightest sound he rose and hastened to the door, convinced they were about to liberate him. But the sound died away, and Dante sank again into his seat. At last, about 10 o'clock, and just as Dante began to despair, steps were heard in the corridor. A key turned in the lock. The bolts creaked, the massy oaken door flew open, and a flood of light from 2 torches pervaded the apartment. By the torchlight, Dante saw the glittering sabres and carbines of 4 gendarmes. He had advanced at first, but stopped at the sight of this display of force. "Are you come here to fetch me?" asked he. "Yes," replied a gendarme. "By the orders of the deputy procureur?" "I believe so." The conviction that they came from M. de Villefort relieved all Dante's apprehensions. He advanced calmly and placed himself in the centre of the escort. A carriage waited at the door. The coachman was on the box, and a police officer sat beside him. "Is this carriage for me?" said Dante. "It is for you," replied a gendarme. Dante was about to speak, but feeling himself urged forward, and having neither the power nor the intention to resist, he mounted the steps, and was in an instant seated inside between 2 gendarmes. The 2 others took their places opposite, and the carriage rolled heavily over the stones. The prisoner glanced at the windows. They were grated. He had changed his prison for another that was conveying him he knew not whither. Through the grating, however, Dante saw they were passing through the Rue Caisserie and by the Rue Saint-Laurent and the Rue Taramie to the port. Soon he saw the lights of La Consigne. The carriage stopped. The officer descended, approached the guardhouse. A dozen soldiers came out and formed themselves in order. Dante saw the reflection of their muskets by the light of the lamps on the quay. "Can all this force be summoned on my account?" thought he. The officer opened the door, which was locked, and without speaking a word, answered Dante's question, for he saw between the ranks of the soldiers a passage formed from the carriage to the port. The 2 gendarmes who were opposite to him descended first. Then he was ordered to alight, and the gendarme on each side of him followed his example. They advanced towards a boat which a custom-house officer held by a chain near the quay. The soldiers looked at Dante with an air of stupid curiosity. In an instant he was placed in the stern sheets of the boat, between the gendarmes, while the officer stationed himself at the bow. A shove sent the boat adrift, and 4 sturdy oarsmen impelled it rapidly towards the pilon. At a shout from the boat, the chain that closes the mouth of the port was lowered, and in a second they were, as Dante knew, in the Frioul and outside the inner harbour. The prisoner's first feeling was of joy at again breathing the pure air, for air is freedom. But he soon sighed, for he passed before La Réserve, where he had that morning been so happy, and now, through the open windows, came the laughter and revelry of a ball. Dante folded his hands. raised his eyes to heaven, and prayed fervently. The boat continued her voyage. They had passed the Tête de Morte, were now off the Anse du Pharaon, and about to double the battery. This manoeuvre was incomprehensible to Dante. "Whither are you taking me?" asked he. "You will soon know. But still, we are forbidden to give you an explanation." Dante, trained in discipline, knew that nothing would be more absurd than to question subordinates, who were forbidden to reply, and so he remained silent. The most vague and wild thoughts passed through his mind. The boat they were in could not make a long voyage. There was no vessel at anchor outside the harbour. He thought perhaps they were going to leave him on some distant point. He was not bound, nor had they made any attempt to handcuff him. This seemed a good augury. Besides, had not the deputy, who had been so kind to him, told him that provided he did not pronounce the dreaded name of Noirtier, he had nothing to apprehend? Had not Villefort, in his presence, destroyed the fatal letter, the only proof against him? He waited silently, striving to pierce through the darkness. They had left the Île Ratonneau, where the lighthouse stood on the right, and were now opposite the Point des Catalans. It seemed to the prisoner that he could distinguish a feminine form on the beach, for it was there Mercédès dwelt. How was it that a presentiment did not warn Mercédès that her lover was within 300 yards of her? One light alone was visible, and Dante saw that it came from Mercédès' chamber. Mercédès was the only one awake in the whole settlement. A loud cry could be heard by her, but pride restrained him, and he did not utter it. What would his guards think if they heard him shout like a madman? He remained silent, his eyes fixed upon the light. The boat went on, but the prisoner thought only of Mercédès. An intervening elevation of land hid the light. Dante turned, and perceived that they had got out to sea. While he had been absorbed in thought, they had shipped their oars and hoisted sail. The boat was now moving with the wind. In spite of his repugnance to address the guards, Dante turned to the nearest gendarme, and taking his hand, "Comrade," said he, "I adjure you, as a Christian and a soldier, to tell me where we are going. I am Captain Dante, a loyal Frenchman, thought accused of treason. Tell me where you are conducting me, and I promise, on my honour, I will submit to my fate." The gendarme looked irresolutely at his companion, who returned for answer a sign that said, "I see no great harm in telling him now." And the gendarme replied, "You are a native of Marseille, and a sailor, and yet you do not know where you are going?" "On my honour, I have no idea." "Have you no idea whatever?" "None at all." "That is impossible." "I swear to you, it is true. Tell me, I entreat." "But my orders—" "Your orders do not forbid your telling me what I must know in 10 minutes, in half an hour, or an hour. You see, I cannot escape, even if I intended." "Unless you are blind, or have never been outside the harbour, you must know." "I do not." "Look round you, then." Dante rose and looked forward, when he saw rise within 100 yards of him the black and frowning rock on which stands the Château d'If. This gloomy fortress, which has for more than 300 years furnished food for so many wild legends, seemed to Dante like a scaffold to a malefactor. "The Château d'If?" cried he. "What are we going there for?" The gendarme smiled. "I'm not going there to be imprisoned," said Dante. "It is only used for political prisoners. I have committed no crime. Are there any magistrates or judges at the Château d'If?" "There are only," said the gendarme, "a governor, a garrison, turnkeys, and good thick walls. Come, come, do not look so astonished, or you will make me think you are laughing at me in return for my good nature." Dante pressed the gendarme's hand as though he would crush it. "You think, then," said he, "that I am taken to the Château d'If to be imprisoned there?" "It is probable, but there is no occasion to squeeze so hard." "Without any inquiry?" Without any formality? All the formalities have been gone through. The inquiry is already made. And so in spite of Monsieur de Villefort's promises? I do not know what Monsieur de Villefort promised you, said the gendarme, but I know we are taking you to the Château d'If. But what are you doing? Help, comrade, help! By a rapid movement, which the gendarme's practised eye had perceived, Dantès sprang forward to precipitate himself into the sea, but 4 vigorous arms seized him as his feet quitted the bottom of the boat. He fell back, cursing with rage. Good, said the gendarme, placing his knee on his chest. Believe soft-spoken gentlemen again. Harkee, my friend, I have disobeyed my first order, but I will not disobey the second, and if you move, I will blow your brains out. And he levelled his carbine at Dantès, who felt the muzzle against his temple. For a moment, the idea of struggling crossed his mind, and of so ending the unexpected evil that had overtaken him. But he bethought of Monsieur de Villefort's promise, and, besides, death in a boat from the hand of a gendarme seemed too terrible. He remained motionless, but gnashing his teeth and wringing his hands with fury. At this moment the boat came to a landing with a violent shock. One of the sailors leapt on shore. A cord creaked as it ran through a pulley, and Dantès guessed they were at the end of the voyage, and that they were mooring the boat. His guards, taking him by the arms and coat collar, forced him to rise, and dragged him towards the steps that led to the gate of the fortress, while the police officer, carrying a musket with fixed bayonet, followed behind. Dantès made no resistance. He was like a man in a dream. He saw soldiers drawn up on the embankment. He knew vaguely that he was ascending a flight of steps. He was conscious that he passed through a door, and that the door closed behind him, but all this indistinctly as through a mist. He did not even see the ocean, that terrible barrier against freedom, which the prisoners look upon with utter despair. They halted for a minute, during which he strove to collect his thoughts. He looked around. He was in a court surrounded by high walls. He heard the measured tread of sentinels, and as they passed before the light, he saw the barrels of their muskets shine. They waited upwards of 10 minutes, certain Dantès could not escape. The gendarme released him. They seemed awaiting orders. The orders came. "Where is the prisoner?" said a voice. "Here," replied the gendarme. "Let him follow me. I will take him to his cell." "Go," said the gendarme, thrusting Dantès forward. The prisoner followed his guide, who led him into a room almost underground, whose bare and reeking walls seemed as though impregnated with tears. A lamp, placed on a stool, illumined the apartment faintly, and showed Dantès the features of his conductor, an under-jailer, ill-clothed and of sullen appearance. "Here is your chamber for tonight," said he. "It is late, and the governor is asleep. Tomorrow, perhaps, he may change you. In the meantime, there is bread, water, and fresh straw, and that is all a prisoner can wish for. Good night." And before Dantès could open his mouth, before he had noticed where the jailer placed his bread or the water, before he had glanced towards the corner where the straw was, the jailer disappeared, taking with him the lamp and closing the door, leaving stamped upon the prisoner's mind the dim reflection of the dripping walls of his dungeon. Dantès was alone in darkness and in silence, cold as the shadows that he felt breathe on his burning forehead. With the first dawn of day, the jailer returned, with orders to leave Dantès where he was. He found the prisoner in the same position, as if fixed there, his eyes swollen with weeping. He had passed the night standing and without sleep. The jailer advanced. Dantès appeared not to perceive him. He touched him on the shoulder. Edmond started. "Have you not slept?" said the jailer. "I do not know," replied Dantès. The jailer stared. "Are you hungry?" continued he. "I do not know." "Do you wish for anything?" I wish to see the governor. The jailer shrugged his shoulders and left the chamber. Dante followed him with his eyes and stretched forth his hands towards the open door, but the door closed. All his emotion then burst forth. He cast himself on the ground, weeping bitterly and asking himself what crime he had committed that he was thus punished. The day passed thus. He scarcely tasted food, but walked around and round the cell like a wild beast in its cage. One thought in particular tormented him, namely that during his journey hither he had sat so still, whereas he might, a dozen times, have plunged into the sea, and, thanks to his powers of swimming, for which he was famous, have gained the shore, concealed himself until the arrival of a Genoese or Spanish vessel, escaped to Spain or Italy, where Mercedes and his father could have joined him. He had no fears as to how he should live. Good seamen are welcome everywhere. He spoke Italian like a Tuscan, and Spanish like a Castilian. He would have been free and happy with Mercedes and his father, whereas he was now confined in the Château d'If, that impregnable fortress, ignorant of the future destiny of his father and Mercedes, and all this because he had trusted to Villefort's promise. The thought was maddening, and Dante threw himself furiously down on his straw. The next morning, at the same hour, the jailer came again. "Well," said the jailer, "are you more reasonable today?" Dante made no reply. "Come, cheer up. Is there anything that I can do for you?" "I wish to see the governor." "I have already told you it was impossible." "Why so?" "Because it is against prison rules, and prisoners must not even ask for it." "What is allowed, then?" "Better fare, if you pay for it, books, and leave to walk about." "I do not want books. I am satisfied with my food, and do not care to walk about. But I wish to see the governor." "If you worry me by repeating the same thing, I will not bring you any more to eat." "Well then," said Edmond, "if you do not, I shall die of hunger, that is all." The jailer saw by his tone he would be happy to die, and as every prisoner is worth 10 sous a day to his jailer, he replied in a more subdued tone, "What you ask is impossible, but if you are very well behaved, you will be allowed to walk about, and some day you will meet the governor, and if he chooses to reply, that is his affair." "But," asked Dante, "how long shall I have to wait?" "Ah, a month, 6 months, a year." "It is too long a time. I wish to see him at once." "Ah," said the jailer, "do not always brood over what is impossible, or you will be mad in a fortnight." "You think so?" "Yes. We have an instance here. It was by always offering 1,000,000 of francs to the governor for his liberty that an abbé became mad, who was in this chamber before you." "How long has he left it?" 2 years. "Was he liberated then?" "No. He was put in a dungeon." "Listen," said Dante. "I am not an abbé. I am not mad. Perhaps I shall be, but at present, unfortunately, I am not. I'll make you another offer." "What is that?" "I do not offer you 1,000,000 because I have it not. But I will give you 100 crowns if, the first time you go to Marseille, you will seek out a young girl named Mercedes at the Catalan, and give her 2 lines from me." "If I took them and were detected, I should lose my place, which is worth 2,000 francs a year, so that I should be a great fool to run such a risk for 300. "Well," said Dante, "mark this. If you refuse at least to tell Mercedes I am here, I will some day hide myself behind the door, and when you enter, I will dash out your brains with this stool." "Threats," cried the jailer, retreating and putting himself on the defensive. "You are certainly going mad. The abbé began like you, and in 3 days you will be like him, mad enough to tie up. But fortunately there are dungeons here." Dante whirled the stool round his head. All right, said the jailer. All right, since you will have it so, I will send word to the governor. Very well, returned Dante, dropping the stool and sitting on it as if he were in reality mad. The jailer went out and returned in an instant with a corporal and 4 soldiers. By the governor's orders, said he, conduct the prisoner to the tier beneath. To the dungeon, then? Said the corporal. Yes, we must put the madman with the madmen. The soldiers seized Dante, who followed passively. He descended 15 steps, and the door of a dungeon was opened, and he was thrust in. The door closed, and Dante advanced with outstretched hands until he touched the wall. He then sat down in the corner until his eyes became accustomed to the darkness. The jailer was right. Dante wanted but little of being utterly mad. End of chapter 8.